Since we have a couple of new faces, first, maybe we can go around and make some quick introductions as we sign into the doc, which is in the meeting invite if you guys don't have that. So maybe Craig, if you want to start. Oh, you're muted.
Got to unmute to do that. I was busy getting the notes up. Nice to meet y'all. I am newly a product person at a company called Blameless. Also working in the SRE tools and platform space. And I am very interested in ways to make our customers more successful by being interoperable with other tools. And lots of people are doing awesome things. And so I'm looking at SLO as a thing to potentially invest in. So right now I'm in the kind of investigation phase, trying to understand what are people's goals and objectives for OpenSLO, and is what we're doing consistent with it. I've done some initial analysis and it all looks very positive to me. So I'm excited to be here. My background is, for the last 10 years, I've been doing things like Hadoop, OpenStack, and Kubernetes, so don't judge me. Next up.
I can try.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, I'm Yanis. I'm based in London and I work at Paddle, which is a one-stop shop service software. I'm the SRE team leader. What else? I'm interested for SLOs. If you see, I had a talk in SLO conference around how we build an internal framework around managing SLIs and SLOs. So now I'm I want to be very active on OpenSLO because we want to open source this internal thing that we have, but we want to make it in a way that is adaptable and follows the SLO patterns for everyone. So that's why we still didn't open source it, but we're waiting to be finalized. But yeah, nice to meet you all.
That's awesome. I'm excited to see that once you guys open source that.
I think I'll be very active on the Slack before we open source it because we need your input. So yeah.
Cool. I'll go really quick. I'm Ian. I work at Noble9. We do SLOs as a service. We're the ones that kind of started doing the OpenSLO, took our spec, threw it out there, see what happens. So yeah, we're so that's what I do.
I'm Andrew Newdigate. I'm in Cape Town in South Africa, as we just mentioned earlier. I built or helped build a SLO framework at GitLab. It kind of evolved. It sort of evolved over a long time. And one of the challenges that we've got at the moment is we are trying to adapt it so that it's more compatible with OpenSLO. So there's a few things where we have incompatibilities or impedance mismatches between things, and so we're trying to get our terminology the same, and it's kind of a great emphasis to kind of sync up with the industry if you want, especially now that SLOs are taking off a bit more. And then the big challenge that we got at the moment is we are very much getting product and executive level buy-in on monitoring, and just trying to nudge them in the direction of best practices rather than totally new and different and maybe not such good ideas. But that's mixed bag there, but we're getting there. The thing is that executives are talking about it, so it's got to be a good thing. And that's me.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You can go first.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Wyatt. I'm also based in London, and I am a software engineer at a small startup called Topico, and we try to help open wealth to be realized, and that is so we're trying to make tooling around for pension advisors so they can get. I didn't prepare this at all.
Don't worry.
Yeah, so if you know anything about open banking, we try to do something for wealth and like pensions and things like that. So that's our goal. Yeah, so I just implement my first SLO this Monday, or got it working on Monday, and I found out about OpenSLO during this conference, OpenSLO, and I just made some proposals to how we could enhance the specification to add alerting based on my limited experience. So I love the experts to give comments and see how it can be made, how to realize it. So yeah, that's why I'm here. And I like to standardize on like power monitoring and SOS in a standardized way. So that we're not like doing the right way, like how everyone else is doing it, and like we'll make it easier to switch between providers. So that's the idea behind it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'll go next. My name's Sal. I joined Noble9 just a couple weeks ago as a customer reliability engineer. I didn't mean to step on your toes, Ian, by joining this or anything like that. I've just previously been involved in a lot of Linux user groups, which then turned into like open source user groups type of things. So I just wanted to, hey, joining the SLO company, I figured, hey, let me at least get a little exposure over here to figure out, hey, what's going on with this, and put an ear to the ground.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm from Target. I just took on a new role here. So I'm a principal engineer of Insights and Chaos inside of Infrastructure's production engineering team.
I like that title.
Yeah, right. It's the second coolest title I've ever had in my career. So I'm still new in role, but one of the big things we're trying to do is use a standard model for success and failure of interaction. First starting with like 12-factor native apps in an internal tool we call TAP, which you can probably find videos about on the internet. And so I'm most interested, for starters, in baking in the criteria for grading interaction into stuff like Swagger. So that's been the experiment I was just running on. We had a short chat about it before the recording started of, oops, I cratered a dev cluster because of the tag spacing of path variables. Anyhow, so I'm mostly looking at OpenSLO to see what everybody else is doing after they've gotten that occurrence level data, but we're still at the part of the journey of standardizing the occurrence data so that we can properly slice and dice it across applications and then thin stripes across experiences across multiple applications at once. Because we have a lot of micro apps running both at the store as well as in headquarters. So we're at a different place of our journey as an enterprise today. So mostly observing.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Awesome. All right. So jumping into it now, following up on our agenda items from last time. Let's see, where were we? Action item. Okay. So the two things we wanted to have as action items is we want to be able to make a kind of end-to-end demo for the OpenSLO spec, like being able to define your SLOs in the SLO spec, and then show the kind of full life cycle into like an alert, like what that looks like, to kind of be able to have kind of your hello world for this. I think there's a lot of value in that, so we can kind of, so that a lot of people can see, okay, we're defining in this spec, what does this look like when the rubber meets the road? So we have a channel in the Slack, channel in our Slack channel. Wait, is that right? My brain just stopped. We have a Slack channel set up for that within the OpenSLO workspace. If anybody's interested, it's the OpenSLO-demo channel. We're still working on getting that going right now. The other part is, as one of the action items, is just creating the issue. And so in the OpenSLO GitHub project, in the 1.0 project, you can see that there is a issue now for the demo, and it kind of has where did that go? I'll find that. It is number 44. So I'll link that in our Slack channel, in the OpenSLO one, so that everyone can see that. But yeah, so that's the issue that we're tracking for the demo. Again, if anybody wants to help out with that, more than, you know, accepting contributors. But yeah, that issue kind of outlines the things that we're trying to hit for all of this. Any questions on that? Cool. Oh, sorry. Yes. Let me, Rob, let me do that.
Sorry, I found it. I can see it here in the Slack now.
Okay. I will also do that. And I'll link it in the in here. Here we go. All right. Cool. Yeah, so we have it in there. You know, it basically, you know, just all of the kind of pieces we want to hit, like, you know, putting into CI/CD, defining any SLOs, etc. Maybe having OpenSLO do some validation in CI/CD as part of that, to show the kind of full ecosystem that we're trying to build here. Yeah, I think when we were talking before, Captain might be an option, because I think they might already be using OpenSLO, so we might be using that, or potentially Noble 9 for the back end on that. So that's some of the options we've been talking about. That's what we have for that. Anybody, any questions, comments, concerns on that?
I only have one technical concern about confidence for alarming. That's been like the big hassle for our internal streaming stuff. And so whenever anybody's thinking about how to like write the alerts for these things, I'm curious to know who's looking at seasonal traffic. Because like I work for a retailer, and so 2 a.m. local time, we shouldn't see anybody buying things at a store because we're closed. And so for us, that seasonal check on don't just alarm if the SLO is at 95% instead of 99.9, also take into account the confidence you have that the service is actually really broken if you only had, say, 100 samples instead of 100,000. So, but otherwise, this looks great for what we would want to solve. That's the only thing I'm interested in hearing more about, how people are tackling that.
Okay. Yeah. And actually, I think one of the agenda items today is talking about the alerting. And actually, that might be a good segue right now, if we want to hop on that to the pull request where you opened for, we have I think 54 was the one specifically about alerting. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so my idea of SLO is that alerting or getting notified that your SLOs are breaching or not is important. So I thought I will make a proposal for OpenSLO so you can define alerting. And my understanding is that it's that you want to have that most of the time you would have similar alerting conditions for an SLO and SLI for different ones. So you have like, maybe you want to alert like latency for a whole bunch of SLOs, like one for integration servers, one for web, one for API. So you don't want to redefine them for each of those. You just want to define those conditions and then apply them or link them to your SLOs. So that's how I made my proposal. So you got one base of this alert policy, and a policy can have multiple conditions. And that condition can then can be like, you can have like burn rate and like with error budgets, or you can define your own custom threshold. And the third component is the notification targets. You can then also say associate an alert policy with a target. So you can like say, if this alert triggers, I want to send a message to like Slack and send an email or something, or want to Optini. And I thought to split it all up, you can easily reuse all of them and use them some sort of building blocks. At least that was my idea, my proposal. And probably to make that even work better, you probably want to split out the SOIs from the SLOs too, so you can reuse it. That too. That was basically the idea. In short, I do have some questions or like open things. For example, how would you? What's the best way to link like alert policy with SOL? Like, do you want to have it by definition? Like, say you can say that everything has a name, so you can say, okay, this SO has this alert policy, and then there's always a dependency on SOL, so you can always assume. Sorry, now I lost my train of thought. Because you link, yeah. So an SO can be associated with alert policy, so the alert policy knows to which SLOs it belongs, or like which ones, and based on that, you can maybe you can generate appropriate alerting rules. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does, yeah. I mean, I will say, like, I think looking at the PR, I think everything that you've laid out makes sense, because it does kind of decouple a lot of like the policies from the alerting and things like that. So it does reinforce the reusability of this, especially, you know, kind of thinking forward as you scale out at all your SLOs. You know, you can have hundreds, you know, maybe thousands, depending on the scale of your platform and things like that. And so that reusability, I think, is going to be key. So I think that the way that you've laid this out makes a lot of sense.
Cool. I only had one. Oh, sorry.
I wasn't going to say anything.
So I read somewhere that there's things like a control look back window. I added it, but I personally have no idea what that means. So if it's not necessary, then we can remove it. But yeah, basically, also alert condition, like I'm aware of 3 different kinds. You have like a burn rate that is based on around like error budgets and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I thought a custom one, this might be useful if you want to just have like an SLO calculated value. We get like a value out of it. And then you can just say, okay, if it's higher than this, I just want to do something. So without error budgeting. And also maybe it's another condition that could be useful. It's like you can define some sort of guard where you say, if all these as well as I defined are not like breaching, I want to do an action and say, okay, if you use GitLab, for example, you can say, I want to disable you want to freeze deployment so that people cannot automatic like deploy things. So that's the idea I had. But maybe it's not, doesn't make sense to add it here. Maybe it's just something like additional or can be solved a different way.
Well, I'll so one thing I'll just say is for the control. Yeah, I don't know what the control look back is either. If anybody else knows.
My expectation scanning just this alert condition for CPU usage breach. I would read this and implement it where I would run my canned query, whatever it was, and I would set the time frame to be 1 hour. And then it seems like you would want to run the query for 1 hour. And then if you transition the internal state to be the alarming state, you'd wait 5 more minutes. And then if it's still in the alarming state continuously for 5 minutes, then you actually fire the alarm. That's how I would implement reading just this doc right here. So if that's what you're intending, Wired, then that's what I would do, reading this.
Yeah. Yeah. So so idea was, I think with these variables, you have like everything you need to generate those recording rules and
Mhm.
alerts for like Prometheus and Alert Manager. So that's what I based it around. That is the main thing I know. I did have to look at Noble 9 and how Honeycomb New Relic does it, and I think this all seem to have the same input variables. Google Cloud Monitoring has a lot of complex stuff, but I'm not sure if that's needed for first iteration of the proposal.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, so like, yeah, the kind of 2 alerting policies that we have are like, like burn down and error budget remaining. And it's like, for both of those, there's like a time frame for it, like, the last, if that lasts more than like 5 minutes or something like that. Those are the kind of 2 ones that we have. The other one that we've been trying to play around with is to kind of help alleviate some of the spiky behaviors, the alert, kind of like alerting policy that's similar to like kind of CloudWatch alerts, if anybody's familiar with that, where it's like you have like basically like time periods of the average of whatever the metric that you're measuring in, and then you can say like how many of those samples are you going to look at, and then you have a threshold within those samples that can be violated before an alert goes off. So if you say that like, so your time period was like 5 minutes or 1 minute, whatever you want it to be, let's say 5 minutes, you average the metric over those 5 minutes and then say, is it exceeding my threshold or not? So good or bad. And then you can say how many of those periods do we want to look at? So if we say like each one of those is 5 minutes and we want to take a look at 5 of them, that would be 25 minutes. So over the 25 minutes, how many of those get violated? And then what that does is it helps with it's kind of the spiky behavior. And this kind of came out of what one of our clients was. They see like, the random, like, spiky stuff, which would set off an alert, and they're like, well, we know that happens. It's part of our system. It's okay. It doesn't actually end up affecting like our error budget, but because that spikes the alert, because that spikes in our burn down, it throws off the averaging of our like 5 minute window that we're looking at. And we're technically, mathematically exceeding our error budget burn down rate. But it doesn't actually, in the long term, doesn't affect us. I mean, it's expected part of our SLI, or sorry, our SLO. So that's an alerting policy that we're looking at right now to add, to kind of crib off of the AWS CloudWatch way of doing the alert policies.
You're going to do multiple interval checks on the interval, or are you going to actually do the mathematical average of the thing?
It should be like mathematical average. So if you like say like, like how like errors, if you're looking at errors, you could just actually, that would be a sum in that case in a 5 minute window. I guess would have to.
Well, if you sum it, then divide it, that's an average, right? And so
Yeah.
the CloudWatch thing, I just pulled up some random doc from Amazon. It looks like they do an interval check and they count the number of intervals where it's exceeding, because if you do an average, you can get this intermediate value theorem junk, or if you get a jaggy line with one of the spikes being super high, but then the next 2 being low, that one height will be high enough that it can drive an average over for 3 windows wide. So the subsampling idea, you may want to be just careful, or at least cognizant, write some test data to test it is what I would do.
Yeah, because the idea is each one of those like periods is self-contained, and so you would just do it within that, and then do the check within that period of like, does that exceed it or not? And it wouldn't carry over. But then, but within the like number of periods that you're evaluating, you say like, how many of these, in how many of these did we exceed our threshold? And so if it's like 3 out of 5, then you would alert off of that. But if it's only 1, it would be okay, and you would just continue the window on. But that's one that I kind of want to throw in there to kind of help with the kind of spikiness that you might see, and which would throw off the averaging.
Yeah, I
But
wouldn't
again,
know how we would want to write that into a standard though. Because then you have to define the interval, and then you have to define like the operations you can pull on the intervals and the counting of the intervals.
Yeah, I might actually be able to, I wrote it up in a PRD. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
I was just going to ask if in the spec, do we actually have to define the math, or is that something we can abstract? Because, you know, you can have lots of different kinds of policies. You can imagine that there could be Box-Jenkins averages, you know, you could do all kinds of time series magic depending on your use cases, because targets load is going to be different than anybody else's, right? And so we'll need different kinds of statistics. And I feel like if we build the math into the spec, we're constraining ourselves unnecessarily.
That's a good point, actually. And actually that is one thing that we've been trying to kind of avoid a little bit, which is kind of getting into like the implementation details for the spec, like some purposeful hand waving, just to allow the implementation to handle that. And like, you know, some background, like even like the alerting, I initially left out for that reason, is that, you know, wanted to say, okay, when you're implementing it, you can do the alert policy. But I think as time went on, and as we kind of discussed it, it seemed that no, that's actually something we want to throw in there. But, you know, like, again, there's still a little bit of like, you know, implementation detail that will need to be hashed out.
It feels like alert policy should fit in here, but I also think the specifics of which function you use to determine whether or not that policy is violated or not maybe shouldn't, because that should be extremely extensible. And maybe it makes sense to define another entity, which is, you know, time series function, and we can have named functions, and you can implement different ones. Maybe we have a set of standard ones. I don't mean to overcomplicate it, but just playing around with ideas here.
Assume for the implementations you can have 2 different alert conditions that the spec is exactly the same, but they differ on metadata. So based on the metadata, you can implement the spikiness you mentioned there, or whatever else you have to do, but the spec is exactly the same, right?
Yeah, and my problem with that is then you don't know, if you move something from one system to another, you have no idea what to expect the behavior to be.
Yeah, fair.
I do also think alerting does have a place, but I do also think that triggering an alert and maybe clearing an alert should be in the spec, but probably not like endpoints or what to do with that alert. So the webhooks and that side of it, I think that would definitely probably be better as an implementation detail, you know, for Alert Manager or Noble 9 or whatever. I don't know how other people feel about that.
I kind of feel, I agree with you on that, to be honest. Like, I think I think it'd be nice to like have that in the spec, but at the same time, like you said, I think it's kind of an implementation detail.
So
The main thing
idea,
is yeah, go ahead. Right.
sorry. So the idea I had behind this is that you can just define targets. So you can say, okay, I have a set of things I want to send a triggered alert to, and how it's done technically, or like in your management solution, is all up for grabs. It's just like you just say, okay, this goes to Opsgenie, and if you want, you can include the credential details, but you can also just say, okay, this is Slack, and then when you read these OpenSLO config files, you can just say, I'm going to generate this alert manager Slack config block or not, because it is pointing for this SRO. I think that's what I had in mind. And I just added the option that you can define custom parameters. Like I could imagine that a Noble 9 or a New Relic or those kind of companies might want to then show like this generated UI that you can just enter the details. So it's just maybe drives their admin application, but it's not necessary. That was at least the first idea I had myself.
So the parameters are sort of open-ended and up to the implementation to kind of, okay. So it's because I was imagining sort of you had to have the universe of all, every different kind of backend there. But yeah, okay, I didn't realize it was just a sort of a map if you want. Yeah, okay.
Okay, that makes more sense. That makes sense.
Because what idea had, you can, for example, okay, you have Slack, and you can define one Slack for channels, really important alerts. So you have this one, and then you have one for less important alerts. You can maybe just define like the Slack channel name and like where it has to go to, or things you can like define later in whatever tooling you have. Or you can just leave it out and just say, okay, I have this target, and then
that makes much more sense. Like if it's open like that, because it doesn't couple you to kind of implementations that much.
Yeah, because I didn't really like that. Like in Alert Manager, you have prefix config for Opsgenie, PagerDuty, Slack, and those things that didn't make sense for me to like introduce. I just want to have flexibility. But if you want to reuse the same one, I thought it might be useful just to give some parameters, but it's not absolutely necessary.
Sorry.
If someone has like a good way to write it down like this, that is not. It's have it required now. Yeah, I can remove it to make it optional, because this makes more sense. Yeah, I can make that change. Sorry, yeah.
So I just want to add, like, is it not the same as data sources? Like we abstract them away and we say you have a data source, a query option, whatever. It is not the same. Maybe we need something similar and be alert manager, and it can be anything, or same thing.
Yeah. That's why I have the targets. Is basically similar idea, I guess. But yeah.
One thing actually that I think Rob just said that made me think about something. For the policy, I don't know if we also want to define something for like when it exits the alert state. Because I could think of some like a situation where we would want to alert, which, well, let's say like I have a use case in mind of, okay, I have an alert, it sends a webhook that stops my CI pipelines. But when it exits, I also want to have another webhook that gets triggered that enables that pipeline. So, it would put in a lock and then remove that lock. I'm wondering if in the policy, like in the spec, we have like a on alarm in that block or stanza, and then a on exit alarm or on good.
Return to normal, I would say.
Return to normal, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe we should probably have like at least one of those, but you don't need to necessarily have like both, because for every use case there when you don't necessarily need to have a return to normal event.
Well, there's also, so you could do enter, I use the word incident, or I can use the word bagel event. Actually, I use the word bagel when I talk with app teams so that they don't feel nervous about blame. We're having a bagel. You've seen the TV show The West Wing, the recession.
Yes.
bagel. So there's a couple ways to do it. You could just say, if my system is meeting these conditions, I am undergoing a bagel.
Mhm.
And then you have a single check that's the bagelness check. And then you mark all the minutes that you're having a bagel. That's the system's in the state of all the measurements tell me I'm having a bagel. The other way to do it is the way you're describing with an I have entered a bagel because these things have told me I've entered a bagel, but I'm not going to say the bagel's over until the system achieves what I call the good state, right?
Mhm.
Another way to do it is to say, I'm just going to document the good state. And if my system's not in the good state, I must be having a bagel, right?
Mhm.
And so these are like the three ways I think about constructing this problem. For me, I'm most interested in opening and closing bagels. And so I don't know how we're going to solve that, but I know that that's one of the long-term goals I have, is that when you're in the middle of a bagel, everybody around you needs to know you're having a bagel so that they don't change things underneath you or on top of you without being warned. And so for me, for us, I'm super interested in that, but maybe that's out of the scope of alarming, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't want to overload alarming just because I need incidents. Like alarming is I want to make somebody know that bad things are happening, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't know if we're overloading alarming to say, put bagelness into alarming is like what I'm seeing here. And maybe alarming is just, hey, this is when you pull the fire alarm. And that's just all that alarming does is pull the fire alarm to say, wake people up. Things are bad. And keeping it simple will make it more accessible. Because if you make it bagel, it's going to get hard.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, Rob, is your goal to make Bagel completely automated? So, you know, there's no human involved in deciding that you're in Bagel state, or
My
will there
goal,
always be humans?
yeah, well, there's always going to be humans because it gets to be the oracleness of, if you can design a system that can monitor to know that your system's not doing its job better than the system itself can report that it's doing the job, it's like the halting problem, basically. So you can never write a better monitoring system than the system you have that's writing the 200s and 500s, right? So there's always a human. I'm more focused on declaring bagelness and then the restoration of bagelness to say we're no longer bageling, so that your ops teams for the 100 micro apps that end up on a phone call in our company for a major, you don't have a human who's a coordinator asking each person verbally, is your bagel over? Is your bagel over? Is your bagel over? They need a UI to know the bagels have stopped. And so that's the first goal, is that if we can get enough confidence built in bagel exits, through automation, then they can trust it to start having it auto close the incidents. But yeah, long term, you're right. That's where we do want to go. I don't sell that internally though, because that sounds too scary.
I mean, my 2 cents on it is, yeah, I think a lot of that might be better in like an incident management system. But just for the purposes of the OpenSLO spec, just being able to have some sort of alerting or some sort of signal coming out of that demarcates like bagel, not bagel, might suffice, and be able, and then from that, like whatever incident management system you have might be able to infer those different types of scenarios that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're working on.
I just realized I haven't been taking notes. I should have been taking notes, but I got the recording, so I'll play that back. Note
for next session, take volunteers to take notes, because it's really hard to take notes and moderate at the same time.
Yeah, and if anybody from my company ends up watching this, this is not guarantees of products we're definitely building. This is just a chit chat session about what one could do with bagel detection. Thank you, Craig. Good reminder.
If you ever make that system, please call it Bagel Detector.
That'll be my open source project, the Bagel Detector.
Yeah. Bagel Detector Incident Management.
But I do think that if you've published a target of 99.9% of requests are successful, then by that publish, you know when the bagel has stopped.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm not sure you need anything else special because the SLO itself says I'm back to achieving on an instantaneous measure or a 5-minute measure or a 1-hour measure. I'm back to triple
Right.
and maybe it's not needed at all.
The extra like inference you're talking about, like the first kind of scenario you were talking about, like the counting the minutes and everything.
Yeah, because like in our system, we do an occurrence system. And so I don't have to evaluate KPI. I just count occurrences of successes and failures. And
Yeah.
so when that ratio returns to the proper percentage with enough samples, I know I'm confident to say the bagel's over. But that's special to me in my implementation. And those of you who are using KPI and going through all of that to determine if the window is good, that puts a lot more heaviness on the back end implementation.
Yeah, and I mean, go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Ian. I was just going to say we have so we also counting occurrences. That's what we're doing, and we use multi-window, multi-burn rate. But we'll have the situation where we've got a 1 hour and a 5-minute interval, and then we've got windows, and then we've got the 6 hour and the 30 minutes, for example. And if it's the short, the 1 hour and the 5 minutes that we run out of budget on, we can sometimes return to we're not in an incident if that fixes, even if the 6 hour, because we know that that's probably going to clear after 6 hours. So we still have an alert state, but we're out of the worst of it, and now we're just in sort of recovery. So we've been thinking about that a lot from a occurrences point of view as well.
Yeah, so that all current windows have to agree that you're having a bagel then, right?
Yeah, if it's the short one. So the longer ones we kind of are more forgiving if the short one was fired originally and then returned. Yeah. But that's done by humans at the moment. We look at it, we say, well, we're just going to ignore the 6 hour burn rate, and we're just going to focus on the 1 hour. We know that that's back to normal, and so we're going to kind of close this bagel.
I only had one question. So I have this concept of alert conditions, and then like alert policy, alert conditions. I was wondering if those conditions is if we should express if it's like an or an and. So like should all the conditions apply, or only it can be like you can make combinations of them. I don't know if that's something that is needed.
Are you talking about the combining multi-window stuff, like what Andrew was talking about?
No, it's like you have like the alert policy, you have like a bunch of conditions defined, and you say, okay, for this alert policy, I want to use condition 1, 2, and 4. And then I was just wondering, do we need to have the option where you say, okay, for this alert policy, I have these 3 conditions, and they should all, how do you say, apply? Or is it like, okay, 1 and 2 should apply, but like a condition 1 and 3 are like is and then like the Boolean operators, basically. I think that's how you call it in English. If something like that is necessary, we can just start with the first one, like say all these conditions need to apply for the alert to trigger.
So my experience, this isn't really an answer, but we had quite, like, especially with the multi-window, multi-burn rate, we had a lot of conjunction, like or conditions. And what we've tended to be doing is breaking those up into, and this is quite Prometheus specific as well, but we've been breaking those up into each condition and then relying on alert managers grouping and inhibition to kind of join those up, because it gives us more control over being able to silence a specific one of those conditions very quickly. And then, but that doesn't talk about the and case. And I know that that's very much the implementation. That's something, because of the way Prometheus and alert managers structure that data, it makes sense for us. So just to comment on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also don't know if it makes sense or not, but yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking at couple of things about how we handle that, but yeah, I don't think right now we're not able to put in like kind of multiple policies right now. So like you're talking about the multiple windows and everything. I do like that idea though, that kind of having those multiple windows that you're looking at for a given SLO. Cool.
Yeah, I just don't know how to like verbalize it in the proposal correctly. So if anyone has good ideas, and don't hesitate to suggest changes.
Yeah, of course. Since we have just have a couple minutes left, I just want to also just talk about your other PR, which I thought was awesome. I don't know if you want to talk about the metadata piece really quick.
Yeah, so at the moment you can design the indicators, and you have like the ratio metrics, and then you have like data source, for example, Prometheus, but I can imagine you just want to include some metadata in that case for like any generators that will read this file. Maybe you just want to include some extra data, metadata to help make decisions, or like to say, I want to generate my recording rules with this instead of that, or something like that. So that's why I tried to allow a bit more flexibility. And alongside of that, I wanted to also suggest a extra labels field in the SRO itself. So you can say this SRO has extra labels, and then in my case, I can imagine that they will get added to the recording rules in Prometheus. So I will make another proposal for that, but that could be useful too, because people probably want to add extra labels to the metrics that might get generated out of these SOLs for reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think one reason why I like the metadata is it can help give also like extra context that extra like information to the implementation. So kind of so if there's anything extra that platform or that implementation is doing that it needs, it will have that. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So the main reason why I made this PR was so I used the slot SRO generator at work. And that has this idea of plugins. So you can have like plugins that will generate your queries. And I was thinking I can use this metadata field then to say, okay, use this plugin to generate this SOI query. So that's one of the reasons why I made this proposal for the metadata field.
Ved, I just want to say thanks for opening this, because this is something I've thought is also really needed. Like I've definitely felt a need for this. The one question I had is how did you differentiate the labels from the metadata? Would you not imagine that the labels were just another metadata sort of on another thing, or is there a difference between them? You said earlier something about
I was not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure. I thought maybe I was thinking maybe X-label is such a typical thing that might be it's worth have its own property in the spec instead of using the metadata. But yeah, like similar to like the tagging that you can tag the SO. I thought maybe it's reasonable close to that kind of functionality. So that's why I thought maybe it's worth its own field. But I can fully see it. You just can also add it to the metadata, and /maybe have like this like with Kubernetes, you have this predefined key names, like Prometheus.io/scrape art or something. You could have something similar for these kind of things then. I also know what would be the best approach for this. I just thought like probably a lot of these tools would have, for example, to add labels to things, so that maybe it's worth its own thing.
Yeah, I think, for my use case as well, it would be super useful to have this and being able to chop things in different ways, and then you can aggregate along different metadata, for example, to give different people different views into errors, and so yeah, there's just endless kind of possibilities of what you can do with good labeling.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about, you have while doing this meeting, like yes, this SOIs you can specify a query. I was wondering if it would make sense to use like this Golang template engine, so you can cherry pick things from your metadata and include it in your query. So like if you have SO for a surface, you can say make it part of your query, and then whatever the tool you use would generate, like populate the template variables.
Oh, so it's like a dollar metadata dot type.
Yeah, dollar
Okay.
that slow dot slow name, or like service name, or like slow dot metadata dot whatever. But yeah, I don't know if that will, but this maybe gives a bit of flexibility, but maybe that can just be outside of the spec, and it's just tooling will do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sloth already does something like that with the Windows, doesn't it? If I recall, it's got a sort of its own template language in that it uses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that implementation is already doing that to some degree. So interesting idea.
Cool. All right. Well, we're coming up on just a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any last minute thoughts, comments, concerns, pitches?
I would just suggest read through the proposal and comment on the pull request.
Yes.
And maybe we can help close that issue and make things have alerting.
Yeah. And again, thank you so much. Like that's like these are like some really like awesome contributions. So I just really want to say thank you.
No worries. I just thought like properly writing proposals makes will move things quicker. So
Yeah.
with maybe a bit selfish, but I thought
That's how these
can, like,
whole
raise-
communities work, is being selfish and sharing it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, thank you for hosting.
Cool.
You. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, always. And I guess I will see you guys online.
Pleasure to meet y'all. I'll leave some
Great.
comments later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sweet. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.